Matt Tamul, I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little bit excited when you see 38 names read out at the O2 in London. Andy Farrell's named his Lions squad. We haven't spoken about it just yet, so I think it's probably about time that we tucked into that, dissected it a little bit. And to begin with, I want to hear, are you more or less optimistic about our chances of winning, Australia's chances of winning off the back of seeing that squad naming?
Yeah, it is exciting, and it is just around the corner, which is good. And I'm going to the one at G, actually, paid for in full. So I'm very, very excited, mate. I don't know. It doesn't, like, it's just exciting that the team's named. The names itself, you probably could have picked. We spoke about Owen last week. That would be an interesting one around the dinner table, but. I'm not sure. Yeah, I honestly don't know what to make of it. I think the fact that the French are kind of the team to beat up north at the moment maybe takes a little bit of the sting out of it. Maybe the Irish, there's a little bit of feeling that maybe they're a bit past their peak, and maybe the English, it's just before their peak. So maybe there is some misguided optimism.
Well, I think if you're trying to look for reasons why this Lions side might be fallible and one that can be taken hopefully to the cleaners, is that, like, let's be honest, Leinster just got smoked, didn't they, by Northampton Saints? And I say smoked, they managed to hang on the Saints there, but it was an epic match, and it showed that a side with internationals littered throughout the 15, Geordie Barrett coming off the bench, RG Snyman there, they still lost against a Saints side that there's some pretty good players in there. Some very good English internationals, a couple of Aussies themselves. But I look at it and I go, is it as intimidating as the 2017 side that went to New Zealand, that drew there in that controversial series? Is it as good as 2013, the side that beat Australia obviously 2-1, or maybe even the side that lost 2-1 in 2001? Here in that epic that finished with Justin Harrison's hands from the gods in Sydney.
Yeah, that line-out still got, I remember that. Well, I guess in 2017 you had the English were really at their peak, weren't they? And that was what probably made it more enticing. Eddie Jones had just set a record for however many wins in a row for the English, and it was very much something silly. And I think if you said 2 years ago or a year ago with the Irish, you'd be saying similar. Like I said, it might just be this kind of bit of timing. That being said, it's going to be, if any of the English have come here in recent times and beaten us anyway without the help of the other two, but or the other three, bar one or two Welsh guys. But if you add in the Irish and their ability to choke anytime a trophy's up for grabs, let's hope that they catch a little bit of that and that infects the whole environment.
That hasn't been brought up too much. It's good. I appreciate that. You started off a bit, you're sitting on the fence a little bit there.
Yeah,
but you've just warmed into it nicely.
Chokers, a lot of them.
I'll tell you what, though, when you do compare, and I just did this exercise where I looked at all the positional groups and I compared them to what I think Joe Schmidt, a rough 38 squad, will be, because he told reporters on Monday, I was one of about 10 journos that was around a table with Joe, and he said that it would roughly be a 38-person squad for that tour to begin with anyway. And I went through, and obviously there's some big selection decisions to go through. Like you're thinking about 6 standout props and probably 4 or 5 locks. And I couldn't find a place for Darcy Swain just yet, but that's more to do with the fact that he wasn't in there last year at all, even in the Australian A system. So it's a long way to come back from. But I don't know if there's a single positional group where the Wallabies beat and better the Lions. I think the back row is probably pretty even, and the loss of Caelan Doris really hurts the Lions there. Rob Valentini would make most international sides. What they do at 6 will be interesting. Do they play both Valentini and Wilson there? We've spoken about that right the way throughout this year and last year as well. But the 10s, that's the area where, to me, is the big difference between the two sides. You've got Finn Russell, who's quality, has been to multiple World Cups, You've got Marcus Smith, Finn Smith. You don't even have a place for George Ford or Owen Farrell there. That's how stacked they are with depth. And then you look at Australia and you go, Noel Olseo is the favourite, but he hasn't played at World Cup. He's been in and out. He's played 30-odd tests. Ben Donaldson's played no more than about a dozen tests and started in only a handful. And Tom Liner's never started a test for the Wallabies himself. So you start looking at it like that and you go, oh, okay, there's a bit to catch up on. And that's, I think, the biggest gulf between the two sides.
Yeah, and I think the one thing in our favour is that cohesion marker that I'm sure Darwin would be loving at the moment is that, you know, if there's anything that we can take in terms of on our side is that the fact that the Lions doesn't have a massive contingent of, you know, like the English in the past. It's probably is Irish dominated, particularly with the head coach. And I dare say he'll probably lean on those kind of markers when push comes to shove. But yeah, look, you know, if you're comparing squads, theirs is obviously a lot stronger. The thing we have is it's obviously at home. We've hopefully built a little bit of time with a year or so together. We definitely don't. Our depth chart doesn't go as deep as you'd expect than, you know, 4 international sides put together. So look, it's going to be exciting. I think you're right. I think I look at that squad and I go, oh, maybe we are a bit of a chance. So yeah, I am getting excited. A lot to happen, though, and a lot of guys to get fit again after a couple of scary incidences on the weekend.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. I'm curious, before we move off this subject, how do you think realistically 15 Irishmen and about 13 Englishmen go when you throw them all on a plane and you ask them to come together for 6 weeks? Is it as seamless as, or, you know, is it as difficult as it's maybe made out to be in the past, do you think?
If they lose a game early, it'll be very, very difficult. If they don't, it'll just be seamless because it's all, you know, once you start losing a game, then pressure comes on. Oh, his favourite, you know, his coach is selecting this guy because he favours this guy, and then little clicks start to form. But when it's smooth sailing, you've won 5 midweek games in a row or whatever, and if you win the first test, then it starts, you kind of seeing the brighter side, and, you know, everything's rosy. So I think getting a bit of pressure early, whether it be a midweek game or the first test, would be huge, because then that just gets a little bit tighter because they'll be coming here. They're, even though it's a home series for us, they're under way more pressure than us in terms of expecting to win. So yeah, exciting.
Yeah, well, of course, those comments from Ben Youngs won't be lost on any of the current class of the Wallabies, I'll tell you that. Hey, so much to look forward to on this podcast, if I can even, you know, not choke along the way. Super Rugby heating up, just a couple of rounds, 3 rounds left in the competition. World Rugby has been down with Brett Robertson in Sydney for the announcement that Nine and Stan will indeed host the broadcast rights of the next few World Cups, including the men's one in 2027. And is rugby off to the Big Apple? A really fascinating kind of discussion there with Brett Robinson yesterday, a friend of the pod. I'm Christy Doran with Matt Tamua. You're listening to the Roar Rugby Podcast. Just before we get into Super Rugby, because it was a really interesting round with a couple of local derbies with the Aussies and the Blues, of course, going up to Fiji. A big kind of discussion yesterday with Joe Schmidt, and this will come out on Wednesday, so a couple of days space. But it was interesting that he did not want to give away anything, Matt. You ask him about how, you know, what the pecking order might be for the 10s or how's he rating things. He didn't want to give you everything. He probably named about 5 10s, about 10 open side flankers, 6 halfbacks, didn't even name some of the current and the incumbents there. He was really doing his best to just not give the Lions a trace of what he might be thinking at this point in time. And when I mean that, he's talking about Kalani Thomas. He's talking about Henry Robertson, who I think have actually made really good fists of their cracks over the last few weeks, and Kalani Thomas a bit longer, that body of work. But it's quite funny when you start going down to your 9th and 10th first, option at open side flanker.
Yeah, it's such an easy one. This, like, what's Joe's job? Is his job to coach the team or promote? Is it both? I think in Australia, as we know, with a competitive market, your job is kind of often a little bit the same, which is probably why we loved Eddie, because he's got his little clipboard with names written on it, and he does the theatre. And whereas, Sensible Joe is very, very just, they don't have to sell the game over in New Zealand. He can just be as professional as he likes. So, yeah, I don't blame him. Like, his job's, ultimately, if you said what's Joe's first job, it's to coach a really good team, and he's doing that. I just probably suggest that maybe whoever's in charge of marketing, the pigeon, as the Batuta like to say, they maybe put someone else who can sell the game a little bit more, because unfortunately that is a part of the job in Australia, because as you know, you need headlines to write, and Joe's probably not your guy.
You love a headline, and it was just so funny. Like a week and a half ago, when Les Kiss gets unveiled and Joe's talking, and they're next to each other at the Sydney Football Stadium on level 4 or 5 or whatever it is, up at the top on the roof, and he's talking about the fact that we're pretty similar, and I'm probably not the most the best guy for you guys in the media, and I'll tell you what, I'll let you in a secret, I don't think Les Kiss is either. So they're so aligned in terms of how they're thinking, and we were just thinking, dear, not that he's quite Sleepy Joe, he's Joe Schmidt, but he's not someone that you're always going to be able to sell a newspaper from, but there's little snippets of gold along the way there. And probably one of the big ones was some loose lips there, where he slightly, probably stole the announcement away from the Waratahs that Pete Samu is going to be coming back to Australian rugby a couple of years at Bordeaux, and he's on his way back. You would have played alongside him. That's a handy addition. Yeah,
it is a handy addition. I guess one thing in Les's favour, though, is his name can obviously be used for a lot of kind of puns quite easily, so I'm sure you guys are all over that. But yeah, Pete Samu, unreal.
Good for a newspaper, that. Not so good for a website. You almost go, I don't know about that.
Fair enough. Well, maybe you got to be a bit more creative. But anyway, Pete Samu, it's so good. He's such a quality footballer. And if you're talking about, like we're talking just then about in terms of depth chart, like he's another guy there that he's definitely in the 38, whether he's in the 15, probably remains to be seen. But just adding some quality really, really helps. I actually read your piece, believe it or not, about coaches getting the most out of them, and one guy who has is Dan. So hopefully, hopefully we get more out of him, because I think he's a big loss. Maybe not someone like your Will Skelton that kind of jumps out at you, but a guy who's a very good footballer and a good man too, like a really good for culture.
Pretty prominent coach also expressed that he thought that the Wallabies hadn't got the best out of Pete Samu, and I put that in my story in there. I didn't quote him at all, but that was definitely his impression, and he would have known pretty well. What do you think? Did Australian rugby not see the best of him in the gold jersey? He made his debut in 2018 against Ireland off the back of a couple of years where he won titles with the Crusaders. But he was kind of in and out. He was used in different roles. Probably didn't always play to his skill set, which is we saw that again for Bordeaux against Toulouse just recently. Like, he is an absolute baller who can do things that not many back rowers can.
Yeah, and he shone really well in the Crusaders kind of environment, where you have that loose forward, almost like a second row in rugby league out wide, as you say, balling, ball playing on the ball, that kind of stuff. So he might suit Joe's system a little bit more. I don't know. It's just a bit hard because, say, under Czech, the back rowers were very much bigger ball carriers, quite direct. Probably a bit difficult for Pete. The game in Super is usually a bit wider, so that suited him. So I think you're right. I think it depends who's coaching, what the style is. But like I said, I very much think he's someone who should be in and around that environment.
I don't know if he'll feature against the Lions to begin with. Anyway, I think there will be there'll be those that played in 2024 will be favoured. I think you're coming from a long way back. If you're outside that group of about 47 that played last year, there was 19 debutants. So I don't think that Joe would want much change leading into the Lions. He's all about continuity and building combinations. So I think you'll see Samu if there's injuries, or alternatively, definitely in the Rugby Championship. There'll be players like your Tom Hoopers and your Langy Gleesons who are off overseas, and I think they will be farewelled and said, thanks very much, let's keep in touch and try to bring you back. Noel Olseo being another one. I think there'll be a bit of a change at that point come the TRC. The other aspect out of that chat, and it was hilarious, and Marty Cambridge, the Wallabies media manager, said, just to cut them more questions. And Joe does this brilliantly where he just speaks for so long at times that you only get one more question in. So there wasn't any idea of only a few more questions. But what I enjoyed was a question from Sam Bruce, which was, well, we actually haven't spoken much about what your reflections were in 2024. What did you discover about the team, and what did you need to know a bit more of, and the biggest work on this year? And he said probably two things. One, we need more consistency at set piece. And we saw that particularly against the Springboks. And then the other one was we need more continuity and connection across the field. And I think he means particularly defensively. We saw Argentina just completely cut up the Wallabies, didn't they, last year, and over in South America. So they were fascinating bits. And then he went on to say that he was really disappointed with the second half in Ireland and Dublin, where they led at half time, and he said that they made a commitment that they would continue to play. They didn't. And he described it as being their kryptonite, all of his kryptonite, and something that they're going to have to address, because they won't be able to shut up shop against the Lions, otherwise they'll get burnt. So that was an interesting reflection on what was a massive year, 6 wins from 13 tests, but they would have learned so much and so much change with so many new players coming in off the back of the disaster of 2023.
Yeah, and I think those lessons will be, I think, they won't be discounted for. So, like, you're talking about talking about Pete Tamu, and then you talk about Langy Gleeson, for instance. If that's a head-to-head, the fact that Langy is probably gone through these lessons and had that, I was talking about cohesion, or learned those lessons together, I think will favour that. I think Joe will be sensible in that sense, that he will pick and stick a little bit, because there's some guys that have lost in Ireland because they didn't play. They shut up shop at half time, and this time they're going to get better for it. So I think like I said, I think it will be. I think they're lessons that will actually count for something, judging on how he's selected in the past.
Let's turn our attention to Super Rugby. Big old weekend. It was fascinating. It was a bit of a scrap out in the West in Perth, particularly in the first half, before the Brumbies blew away the Force in the second half. And I think the absence of Carlo Desano was really telling for the Force. But injuries as well with the loss of Noel Olseo. Thankfully, he's been cleared of any significant damage after that really scary incident. There was a couple of scary incidents as well in the Waratahs Reds derby on Friday night, with Joseph Kuswali as well being concussed, and he didn't move for some time before he was carted off and stretchered off in that Medicab. A really enjoyable game on the Friday night. There was rain once again. The Reds have probably played the last 6 matches in the rain, I'd say, and it was hilarious to hear Tate McDermott say, bloody hell, I'd like it just to be dry for once. But what did you make of the two games there? The Reds just came from behind, won it at the death. A really brilliant piece of play from the Reds. Kalani Thomas, great at half-pack, managed to find some space. Good ball to Filippo Down-Gunu, who's just puts it on the money for Lockie Anderson to run onto, and they score, they win the game, and they hold on. And it was a really enjoyable game. What did you make of it?
Yeah, you're right. It was good theatre. Like, it was good entertainment, good theatre. It was great. And like, the Waratahs are a gutsy team. You can just tell they've really, really improved since last year. I don't think they'll feature in the finals necessarily, but it's good to see them making good strides. They played their part, and I think the Reds will be happy, because the rain hasn't probably been their best friend. Really, that's when they've kind of come unstuck a little bit. And the fact that they found a win, I'm so glad Filippo's back. I'm sure you are too. I just think he's such a quality footballer and he's in such good form. So, yep, good game. And then the Brumbies, I think you're right. Carlo Tizzano probably would have had 3 turnovers, which in that game, so that probably would have got the Force to about 25% possession at least. So it was very one-sided. The poor guys struggled out there on a night. I thought it might have a little bit of a special feeling with the 20-year anniversary. Was it 20 years? Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years, yeah.
I thought it might have had one of those feelings, that special night where the Force kind of gets something done, and it's one of those nights remembered. But the Brumbies well and truly spoiled the night.
It was nice to see, though, nonetheless, and the bit of the guard of honour from the Force kind of. I think there was about 50 or so former Force players there. And that's a special moment for the history of the club, and it's been through the absolute ringer. Thinking about the early days. They had some absolute star-studded sides and probably didn't achieve what they wanted to, but maybe derailed from off-field distractions with star power back in the day. And then obviously, they were pitted against the Rebels themselves in 2017 and go away for a couple of years, come back after a stint in Global Rapid Rugby. So they've really had an extraordinary 20 years. And the story's not come out just yet, but I spoke to several people who have been involved in the club, like John Mitchell and Cam Shepherd, and they've all got interesting takes about what hasn't quite gone right. But I think fundamentally they just need to continue to grow the pathways there because they need to get stronger depth. And that's the thing, they love the supporter base there, but depth is key and it's king, and we've seen that, the litany of talent that have come through at the Crusaders. That's because they get good players and they grow and develop great players too. So they managed to retain them, generally speaking, and it doesn't happen overnight. So fingers crossed, better things on the horizon. I think they'll probably miss out in the finals again. It was only a couple of weeks ago we were talking about the fact that there was 4 Aussie sides in the top 6, and now the Force and the Tars are just slipping week by week at the moment. It doesn't get any easier this week either.
No, I know. It was fun while it lasted. It was good doing a bit of Kiwi bashing for a week or two. But yeah, we're well and truly back to normal proceedings in a way. But look, I think the way the Force have gone about it in terms of a slow progression, which will hopefully have a longer term kind of focus in that sense, and having the backing of Twiggy and not feeling like they've got to sell tickets straight away is probably going to be good for the club long term, because I think you're right. Like the club came, signed names, and then didn't really build that pathway, didn't get the results, and kind of didn't build it on solid footing in a way. And God, I still remember when we played the Force in 2008, I think it was, and we were flogging them at halftime, and then Gitz has gone off at John Mitchell, send them out of the change rooms, and they come back in the second half and tout us up. And it's just always kind of been that chaotic ride. So I think they're enjoying a bit of a steady kind of progression, and you can see that they're doing wonders over there at the moment. So slow and steady, I think, will win the race for them, which is good.
They certainly need it. I think at the very least they're playing some really attractive rugby, despite the fact that they, it's probably more of the Force of 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago that was on display on the weekend. They're so dogged in defence, but that occasionally happens. You can't always score 30 points, and you can't just throw the ball around all the time. And as we said, the loss of Tizzano was a big one. They're heading to Fiji this week, and my understanding is that Simon Cron, they've only got one more game after this as well, a home game against the Tars. They need to win both their last games to have a chance, and that even mathematically, if they do that, they're not guaranteed to make it either. But I think there'll be a couple of changes. I've heard Ben Donaldson will go, but that was a last minute flip around. I think Hamish Stewart won't be heading there. Carlo Tizzano, I don't think will be there either. Harry Potter, another one, I think is going to be left behind so that they play and take on the Tars a week later. That's maybe a bit of sensible management, generally speaking, but when you need to win your last 2 games, you do question these things a little bit, but it's going to be tough in Lautoka. That's the side, the place in Fiji where no one seems to win.
Yeah, really, really difficult one. This is probably one in the past, if it was early in the season, would make a lot of sense. some interesting conversations because, 4 points in Lautoka is not worth any less than 4 points at home, so but does taking out from that pot, worse than that pot? I don't know. It's kind of what makes it really interesting in a way. I think it is in a way desperate measures in a sense. So do you just reduce your training load and go hard at the games? It'll be interesting to see how it goes because I don't think there's a right way, which makes it quite interesting to analyze in a sense. And I'm sure we'll all have a bit of hindsight bias once it's done and go, I told you they should have arrested people. But I hope they can do it. I really do. I really, really do. It would be great for us to have either the Force or the Tars in there as well. But I think you might be right. It might be a bit of a stiff kind of proposition.
Friday night, the Waratahs is going to take on the Crusaders. The Crusaders have lost Will Jordan to a leg injury, so he's going to be out for a little while. It comes off the back of Kamara being out as well. So James O'Connor will come across, play in Sydney, probably play in front of the Australian selectors. So big opportunity for him. The Crusaders got dusted in the second half against the Chiefs last week. So got they'll come over here knowing that they've struggled against the Waratahs in recent years and they've just been pumped against the Chiefs at home. They'll probably have a bee in their bonnet. That's a big game. Tane Edmund, I think, took a step forward for the Waratahs on the weekend. He was clean with his delivery, great under the high ball. And I was just so pleasantly surprised to see a kicker in Australia reel off 35, 40 metres consistently from penalties. It was awesome to see his touch finding ability on the weekend. And it was funny, I saw him a few days earlier just practicing that. It really paid off there, kicking for touch and for the 5 metre line, or as clearing their own lines as much. What did you make of Tane's performance against the Reds? A first start since round 3.
Yeah, it's honestly, I think it shows the mark of the guy and the quality of the guy because I said in the pod quite early, I got the feeling that maybe he probably didn't suit the style that they were wanting to play at the Tars, and that seems to be being the case. But he's clearly worked hard, and when he got a chance, he had a red hot crack, and good on him. I think he's clearly got a lot of talent. He's the kind of guy who hasn't been gifted it by any means. So it's just one of those things though. Like long term, does it suit the Waratahs the way they want to play? I'm not necessarily sure, but you can tell he's a guy who would be awesome in the environment. I reckon most people in the team would love playing with him because he's clearly a bit of a fighter. So yeah, good on him. He deserves it. And I'm sure there was a lot of pressure relieved in a way after some frustrating nights, no doubt, this year.
The Waratahs will lose Suwali, so I think you'll probably find that Andrew Kellaway will go to fullback and Darby Lancaster start on the wing. It seems like a pretty seamless kind of switch there. Up front's probably obviously where it gets won and lost against the Crusaders. The Crusaders pack has been outstanding all year. Scott Barrett, after a slow start, has found his feet very much so. Taniela Tupou took a step forward for the Tars. There's no doubt about that. Scored a try, showed what he can do close to the line. He did that against Wales last year and at times for the Wallabies as well. But he just seemed to, it just seemed like a little spark had been ignited in him recently. And maybe that's what happens when you come up against your old team, the Reds, and you're looking for a little bit more and to get involved and get stuck in. And I think the fact that Dan Botha was yellow carded around the 30-minute mark, I think it was the best thing for him. He probably didn't expect to come on early, came on and made an impact, got a good result at the scrum time. And that probably just gives him a little bit of confidence before he goes off just before halftime and goes, you know what, I've made a positive contribution there before scoring a try in the second half.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it'll be, he's got obviously a big challenge. We talk about, I was just speaking then about Tane, having a few frustrating nights. Here's a guy who's probably had that, added a couple of years, considering his potential and any comments that we make about him is only because we're almost frustrated as well because we see his potential as well. So Look, yeah, I just hope I hope he does it again. I really hope he's in a good place, and it was good to see a lot of support around him. And like I said, it's because he's such a likable, lovable guy, and such a guy with so much potential who we kind of really hope starts delivering for us again as he has in the past. So yeah, good to see. I hope he's in a good place, and yeah, good time to test it against some All Blacks.
He spent Tuesday with Joe Schmidt, Monday with Joe Schmidt, Monday with Mike Cron as well. Some people there, obviously the Wallaby selectors and coaches, that I'm sure would have just been there to be a sounding board and put an arm around him and remind him that he's as good as he can be, because there were some frank and raw quotes that he gave to Jonathan Drennan and the Herald just last week around him thinking that his chances, he was no chance of taking on the Lions. And, it went as far to say, like, what am I doing out here? Like, can I even play rugby? So it was a great interview. Dave Parecki, the guy who came back on the week after a long kind of period out, I think he'll be in the Wallabies mix if he can string a couple of games together. Fergus Lee Warner back as well for the Tars. His first game this year for them after a long hiatus. So good signs for them. Big game Friday night. The game I'm most excited about, though, is Saturday. The Brumbies hosting the Reds. The Brumbies into second with the chance to potentially, if they can finish the season with a couple of back-to-back wins, very much cement themselves and seal, ultimately what could be a home semi-final if they can get off to a good start in the quarters. It's a huge game. Like, how big is that for a player knowing that the destiny is in their hands? They don't have to rely on other teams to slip up. They've just got to win the next couple of games.
Yeah, massive. I actually last week had a little bit of like a networking event at the Brumbies and had a good chat to some of the players and more importantly the staff. And I was like, gee, who would have thought after losing 3 games or whatever, you're still a chance to be in the top 2? Like, they were as surprised, I think, as most people, in the sense that how close the competition's been. So I think you can see them with a bit of momentum now, which is good. I think the fact that they're at home is massive for the Reds. I think they finished the year against the Crusaders, so that could be very much a battle for the second spot. So it's very much within your you can control it, but that being said, you still have to control it. So I'm really excited. I think the Reds and Brumbies have really started to build quite a good little rivalry in the last few years. They've been the best performing teams for a little while now. So I think it'll be I think it'll be a very, very tough match. I think it looks like it will be dry here, so Tate will be happy. But I think his boys will be absolutely raring for it this weekend. So yeah, can't wait.
I can't either. The Brumbies on 39 points, the Chiefs on 41, but they'll have the bye this week. So they'll have 2 games to finish with, but they're not playing this week. So the Brumbies with the chance to go 2 points clear, potentially 3 points clear. If they win against the Reds, who themselves are in 4th, they've got a 5-point buffer between them and the 5th place Blues. So it's a lot to play for. One of the biggest games this year in Super Rugby, to see if a Brumbies side can put themselves right at the epicenter of a top 2 finish. So here is hoping that it's a good game. And look, the Reds will be desperate themselves to win because they know that they take on the Hurricanes, I think, next week themselves. So a big clash to come. They wouldn't want to be sliding down the pecking order at this time of the year, despite the fact that they've got the draw in the last round where they would hope to get up. I think you'll see Hunter Paisami back for the Reds in the midfield. He had a cork last week. Sarah Ura, unfortunately, I think he'll miss a couple of weeks at least, which is a massive blow for them, given how impressive he's been and versatile. So, Tom Liner, he's touch and go. He didn't come back in the second half against the Tars, but hopefully you see him back there as well. Mentioned earlier, Noel Olosio unlikely to play in this match either, with the teams to be announced in the next day or so. But I can't see him coming back off the back of that scary incident. Tries to go in there for a ruck to secure the ball, and unfortunately just got twisted and squished backwards, basically, didn't he? And it was an absolute agony on the deck. What do you as a player, that would have been difficult to witness there and then try to put that behind you. But for Noah, that I hope it doesn't leave him any kind of, just leave him second guessing himself going forward when there is the next opportunity for him to hit a ruck, because I can't imagine you forget that overnight.
No, not at all. And yeah, I guess first thing should be said is, yes, so glad he's okay. That was super concerning, just the way it happened. And, the scans have shown that, it's okay, but it doesn't scan the impact as you're alluding to there, the mental kind of scars that it will have, because you're right. Even just in terms of fronting up this week or next week, it's difficult because things going through his head as he's going through these scans with a neck brace on, like, will I ever play again? Blah, 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 blah. Like, that's going to take a while to kind of get over. And I've known it personally. It's not easy. It's very, very difficult. And I struggled to come back from that at all. Actually, when I had a kind of similar incident, I definitely didn't go for the ball as hard as I used to. So he's a brave guy. Hopefully got many, many years ahead of him. So yeah, look,
I think hopefully that, Matt? When did you?
That happened against Queensland in maybe 21, 22. And then, I really struggled to get back into kind of that physical side of it, putting your head first, just very much upright from then on, because it's, it's scary. You start going like, what's this for? Like, people are going to forget who you are very quickly, and you're going to be stuck with all these ongoing issues. So not something that, like I said, I saw him and I get quite nervous about that. But I'm just glad he's okay. And I hope he's given time and he doesn't rush it, because he's got a whole life to live. We can find other players to fill his position for now, but he needs to get on with his life and have a good quality of life. So, hoping for him, mate. Hoping he recovers well.
Well, Matt, the other bit of news on Monday, friend of the pod, Brett Robertson, who, of course, joined us last year, he was in Sydney for the announcement, which was probably the worst-kept secret, that Nine and Stan were going to host the next few World Cups on their platforms. But a handful of us journos spoke to Brett afterwards, and he said that there's some big and significant meetings coming up in London with World Rugby Council catching up, and one of the things that he needs to speak to about is the US issue, which we touched upon last week. But it was interesting, and the push for one of those sides, or perhaps a couple of those sides from the Major League Rugby, to maybe join Super Rugby or maybe the United Rugby Championship if they're on the East Coast there. And it was fascinating hearing Brett just talk about the fact that they need to be doing much more, the collective body around how to ensure that the US doesn't become a problem, and that the problems that there are at the moment are resolved over the next few years in the lead up to them hosting the Men's World Cup in 2031, but also the Women's in 33. But he flagged the possibility, and he's since contacted me since. He said at the time, we're going to host, New York hosts the Nations Cup final in 2030. He's since come back to me and said, actually, look, that's what we're hoping for. It's actually got to get signed off by the council. So whether or not that actually occurs remains to be seen. But I like the idea of a Nations Cup, which is going to be a biannual thing, going to somewhere like New York ahead of a World Cup. I think it almost puts rugby on the map a year out before the biggest event, the event that gets all the money for World Rugby, which ultimately trickles down to the member unions across the world. Would you like to see a Nations Cup final, which obviously hasn't been played yet, the first one next year, but the third edition in New York?
Yeah, it makes sense in terms of promoting the game. The Super Rugby one is quite interesting for me. Like, that's, I think we said last week, how much of a responsibility is it on Super Rugby to promote the game, and they're so if they do choose to do that, hopefully World Rugby are kind of, paying for it in a sense, because it is difficult if people here can't, their team's gone for a week or two to the States. I guess in a way, the way the world is now with social media, the States isn't as far as, some other places. We feel quite connected to it in that sense. And there's friendly time zones, culturally quite similar. But yeah, I don't know. It's always been an interesting one. Part of me as a Super Rugby person just says it's a bit too hard for us. Let them deal with it. But who knows? Maybe a bit of a progressive mind is what we need to grow the game.
I think it was fascinating. Like, we had Mark Robertson on last week, and he did, talk about the markets and so forth, and that's important. Looking to see what can be done about the growth of the game. Like, they did post a deficit, a big one as well. Just last week at their AGM, unions are struggling financially. So if there is a way to ultimately see the game prosper and set it up for sustainability, and if the US is a key part of that going forward, well, that sounds great. But yes, I agree, and I know the social media reaction has been on the largely like negative, going exactly what you've expressed there. Like, why are we helping out other people, emerging nations, when we're struggling a bit ourselves? So, yeah, it's a fascinating one. I think, at the very least, there are some really rich and wealthy people looking to support that in the United States. So I don't think it's something that Australia and New Zealand is going to be picking up the bill there. So that's got to be emphasised. But I do acknowledge that there's a lot of risk around that and destabilisation more than anything. So we will see, but watch this space much more over the next 3 to 6 months to develop around US rugby and what it means for Australia and New Zealand. Hey, Matt, it's going to be a big weekend coming up. Another huge derby, Queensland down in the Brumbies in the ACT, in the capital there, and we'll find out whether or not the Brumbies are going to be at the top of the Super Rugby standings at the end of this week. Good to join you on the pod. Thanks for your time. I know that a lot of people are listening to it, and it's this time of year where you start getting excited and you're drawing up who might be featuring for a Wallabies side as well. So, yeah, lots to look forward to this weekend.
Heating up in the capital, mate. I can't wait.
Cool. Cheers, mate. Talk soon.